All right, let's talk about 1.2 values, a day at the beach. So we've got some of you who were absent and still need to get this caught up. So let's walk through it. So you're creating kind of like the Adventure Libs assignment. You're creating a scenario where you're going to enter some information, and then after we get all these inputs, we're going to turn it into a story. So we start off at line 11 with our first line of code. Our comments at lines 8 and 9 say get input asking for an adjective and assign it to a variable called ADJ1. So we start with ADJ1. That's the name of our variable where we're going to store what they say. Assign means equal, so there's an equal sign right there. And then we have input because that's what it said, input. And we follow that with parenthesis, quotation mark, and we just tell the user to enter an adjective. And then we close it out, quotation mark, parenthesis. So an adjective is a word that describes a person, place, thing, or idea. Things like pretty dog, or sleepy cat, or red balloon. Anything that's going to be descriptive of a noun. Line 15 says get input asking for a plural noun and assign it to the variable called noun1. So we've got noun1 equals input, and then we've got our parenthesis quotation mark, enter a plural noun, and then quotation mark parenthesis. So plural noun is more than one. So I might have one cat, or I might have three cats. Cats with an S is a plural noun. I might have one dog or more than one dog, meaning dogs with an S. Okay, so more than one. Line 19, we've got get input asking for a number and assign it to a variable called num, N-U-M. So we start with NUM, that's the name of our variable. Equal means assign, input, and then we have parenthesis quotation mark, enter a number, quotation mark, parenthesis. So be careful when we run this and test this. You must enter a number for this one. If you don't, you're going to get a false bug. Okay, it's going to say that something's wrong with either line 19 or 24, and that's just because you didn't enter a number and it's expecting to be able to do something with that number. Okay, so line 24, it feels scary, but it's really not. So it says typecast num to a float, divide it by 7, and assign the result to a variable called num underscore div. That's like num divide is what it's standing for. So line 24, we start with our variable label, which it just told us right here, is num underscore div. Equal means assign. And then we need to typecast. So typecast is this new vocabulary word that we've been working on all week. Typecast means you change a variable from either a float, integer, or a string to another version, float, integer, or string. Okay, so when we first, up here in line 19, created num, and we asked it for input, the computer assumes that that input is a string. And what is a string? Well, this is an example of a string. Okay, it's words inside quotation marks. Okay, so the computer assumes that what's stored in here is just more words inside quotation marks. And we can't do math with strings. So in order to be able to do math, we have to either turn it into a float, which is a math type with a decimal point, positive or negative, or an integer. And an integer is a whole number, positive or negative. So we actually want to do something with it mathematically. So we turn it into float, and then no spaces here. It's very important, no spaces. Float parenthesis, and we put num, which is the variable from line 19, inside the parenthesis. And then we go divide by 7. How did I know that? Because it says it right here, divide by 7. So it reads num underscore div equals float parenthesis num parenthesis divide by 7. Okay, so now pop quiz. What data type is being stored in num underscore div right now? Well, if you guessed float, you are correct. Okay, because if we turned this into a float and divided it by a number, the computer assumes that that number too is going to be a float. And so now numDiv is a float, which is not a problem until later on when we want to print numDiv along with a string. We're going to have to typecast it again. That's the only reason I bring it up now. Okay? Let's move on to line 28. Line 28 says verb1 equals input, parenthesis quotation mark, enter a past tense verb ending in ed, quotation mark, parenthesis. And how did I know that? Because it says so here in the comments. I have input, I have assign, and I have variable called verb1. So we always start with the variable label, equal to assign, input comes next, followed by whatever question we're asking them to input, them being the user, okay? By the way, past tense verbs ending in ed are things that happened before that we put an ed on the end, like walked, or what's another one? Swimmed, baked, what's another one? Gamed. I gamed with my friends yesterday, okay? So that means it happened in the past. Line 32, we're talking about get input asking for another plural noun and assign it to a variable called noun2. So we start with noun2 in line 32, equals, input, parenthesis, quotation mark, and we just give them the command, enter a plural noun, quotation mark, parenthesis at the end. Don't forget those ending quotation mark parentheses. By the way, have you noticed that all strings are red in our program? And all inputs are blue, and all variable labels are black? That also helps you kind of detect whether or not you have a bug or a mistake when something's not the right color. All right, let's look at line 36. We've got get input asking for another adjective and assign it to a variable called adj2. So we start with adj2 equals input, parenthesis, quotation mark, enter another adjective, quotation mark, parenthesis. And remember, an adjective is a word that describes a person, place, thing, or idea. That's a good idea. Good is the adjective. That is a wonderful classroom. Wonderful is the adjective. Line 40. We've got get input asking for a present tense verb ending in ing and assign it to a variable called verb2. So we start with verb2 equals input, parenthesis, quotation mark, enter a present tense verb ending in ing, quotation mark, parenthesis. So things like walking, swimming, running, farting, ha ha ha. If you want to make this a funny day at the beach, that is. Then we've got line 44. 44, we've got get input asking for another plural noun and assign it to a variable called noun3. So we have line 44 says noun3 equals input, parenthesis, quotation mark, enter another plural noun, quotation mark, parenthesis. Again, that's another noun where there's more than one, like fishes or cats or dogs or people or rocks, or what else would you find at the beach? Umbrellas with an S, anything that's more than one. Line 48, we've got a print a blank line for readability. You're going to see this a lot in your assignments. So we need to make sure you know how to print a blank line for readability. That just means when we go to print this, there'll be a space in between what we wrote and what comes next, and it just makes it easier for the user to read. So that line looks like print, open, close, parenthesis. Some people have also done it like this. They go print, open parenthesis, quotation mark, and then they just do some spaces, no period, just some spaces, quotation mark, parenthesis. That also works. I just prefer this first one because it's just shorter. That's all. But they both work. All right, now at line 51, we get into the story. Here's where we're not creating variables anymore. All of our variables are created above line 51. We're going to do a lot of prints and concatenation after line 51, okay? So we're going to start out at line 54. It says print the story title, A Day at the Beach. So we start with print, parenthesis, quotation mark, and you type in A Day at the Beach. You can be all caps or just capitalize the first letter of each word. Totally your prerogative, okay? Line 57, we've got a print, and it says to print this dotted line. Okay, so in order to do that, we start with print, parenthesis, quotation mark, because this is still a string even though there's not words. A string is just letters and symbols that the computer just throws out there because you tell it to, okay? So in order to get this, you're going to push the button next to 0 on your keyboard. That's your dash, and that's also your underscore, okay? So push that as many times as you want. Don't count them. Don't be that crazy person that counts all those dashes. That's crazy. Just put some in there. Close it out with a quotation mark, parenthesis, call it a day. Moving on to line 62, we've got print. And here's our phrase. Yesterday we went to the beach. We had a... And now we concatenate. So we're going to go plus adjective 1 plus concatenated with the word time. Okay, so what does that look like? It looks like print, parenthesis, quotation mark. Yesterday we went to the beach. We had a... Don't forget your space right there. Okay, that way our words aren't all jammed together. Quotation mark plus ADJ1 plus quotation mark. Make sure you got a space right in front of the word time. That way, again, whatever comes out of ADJ1 is not crammed up against the word time. And then we end with time, exclamation point, quotation mark, parenthesis. And if I'm going too fast, just hit the pause button or slow the video down. All right, let's look at line 68. We got a lot of comment tags here. So it says print. It wouldn't have been so... And we're concatenating with ADJ1, so we will go plus ADJ1 plus. And then we do the rest of the string, except that when we got there, we saw, and we're going to concatenate again with noun 1. We go plus noun 1 plus. Anytime we see concatenate, we know we need a plus sign, okay? And then we end with the word with. Or not, sorry, we don't end with the word with, we end with a period. My mistake, we end with a period. So what does that look like? It looks like a very long sentence. That's what it looks like. So let's start at line 68. It starts with print, parenthesis, quotation mark. It wouldn't have been, ooh, I found a typo. It wouldn't have been so, space, don't forget your space, quotation mark, plus ADJ1 plus, that's your concatenation of your variable. And then we do quotation mark, space, except that when we got there, we saw, space, don't type the word space, click the space bar, okay? Quotation mark, and then we go plus noun 1 plus, and then the very last thing, don't forget the punctuation. We go quotation mark, period, quotation mark, parenthesis. Okay, so we have 3 concatenations in that sentence. 3 of them. That's a lot. So let me scroll back over so you can see the whole thing again, just in case I went too fast. So print, parenthesis, quotation mark, we have our string, plus ADJ1 plus. We have the rest of our string. Then we have plus noun 1 plus. Then we have our period. And don't forget that parenthesis all the way at the end. Okay, I believe that's the longest one we've got to do for this assignment. Let's look at 72. 72 comment says, print, we were so surprised. The plus noun 1 plus. We're everywhere. All right, here's what it looks like. Print, parenthesis, quotation mark. We were so surprised! Exclamation point. The space, quotation mark, plus noun 1 plus, quotation mark, space. We're everywhere! Exclamation point, quotation mark, parenthesis. You know what? I think by the end of the semester, you're going to know what a quotation mark and a parenthesis are. I do believe. All right, here's another long one at line 79. We've got print. I hadn't seen any, plus noun 1 plus, in, plus num plus, days. That's, and in here we've got a typecast. We go str, parenthesis, num div, parenthesis, plus, and then weeks. That's a lot. So let's start off with the line of code. Print, parenthesis, quotation mark, I hadn't seen any, space, quotation mark, plus noun 1 plus, quotation mark, space, in, space, quotation mark, plus num plus, quotation mark, space, days, exclamation point. That's the THAT apostrophe S, space, quotation mark. Here's the hard part, the tricky part, the typecasting. This, ladies and gentlemen, is typecasting. This right here. Okay? So we hadn't seen any in blank days. We go plus str for string, parenthesis, num underscore div, parenthesis, plus sign. Then we do quotation mark, space, weeks, exclamation point, quotation mark, parenthesis. Okay? Now you might be wondering to yourself, why do we turn numdiv into a string right there? We turn numdiv into a string right there because in order to print a string along with what's stored in the variable also has to be a string. And if you recall way back up at the top when I was talking to you about numdiv, we turned it into, I believe it was a float. And so because it's a float, we can't print strings and floats at the same time together. We've got to turn it back into a string. So the only thing we print is strings. All together now. Okay? Could I print a float by itself? I sure could, but I can't have strings with it. It would just have to be like print numdiv. And that was it. Like nothing else. No words, no explanation. That would be okay. But to print words with it, strings with it, we've got to concatenate and we've got to typecast. Okay? All right, moving on. A lot of vocab there for you. I'm sure you wanted to know that. Line 84. We've got print, parenthesis, quotation mark, the word we, space, quotation mark, plus verb 1 plus, quotation mark, space, them with, space, quotation mark, plus noun 2 plus, quotation mark, comma, don't forget that comma right there, space, and in the end everything was, space, quotation mark, plus adj2 plus, quotation mark, period, quotation mark, parenthesis. That was a lot, I know, but it technically was shorter than the other one. So let me scroll back so you can see the front again, in case I went too fast. Take a look at what we've got. We've got 3 concatenations in there. 3 of them. Okay. Alrighty. Let's scroll down and look at line 89. 89, we've got print, parenthesis, quotation mark. We finished off the day by, space, quotation mark, plus verb 2 plus, quotation mark, space, in the ocean and building sand, space, quotation mark, plus noun 3 plus, quotation mark, period, quotation mark, parenthesis. Okay, those periods at the end are just to make the sentence a complete sentence with punctuation. Alrighty, and I believe this is our last line of code, way down here at 94, and you all never believed we'd get here, but we did. So we've got print, parenthesis, quotation mark, space, and that was my space, quotation mark, plus ADJ1 plus, quotation mark, space, day at the beach, exclamation point, quotation mark, parenthesis. Now we gotta test it to make sure we don't have any bugs. Alright, I'm going to hit the run button. By the way, I'm hitting the run button up in the top left, not the run solution button over on the right, which is in the assignment. See, this is a solution, an example solution. This one up at the top is your code. Okay, don't get them confused. Hit run. It says enter an adjective, a word that describes a person, place, thing, or idea. So I'm going to say, it's the beach. I'm going to say smelly. Smelly. Like a middle schooler. Okay, enter a plural noun. More than one. We're going to say smelly. Sharks. Sharks are at the beach. And then it says enter a number. Ooh, I don't know. 42. And then it says enter a past tense verb ending in ed. So I'm going to say, what am I going to say? Fished? Fished. By the way, do you see how my line here is spaced and these aren't? That's because I hit a space when I was coding that. So that doesn't hurt anything, but that's why it does that. Fished. Enter a plural noun. I already said sharks. I'm going to say fishes. Enter another adjective. I'm going to say, what am I going to say? I already said smelly. I'm going to say slimy. And enter a present tense verb ending in ing. I'm going to say, I don't know, let's say bathing, like a bathing suit. Enter another plural noun. I'm going to say people. Okay, here's the story. Mad Lib's version. Yesterday we went to the beach. We had a smelly time. It wouldn't have been so smelly except when we got there we saw sharks. We were so surprised. The sharks were everywhere. I hadn't seen any sharks in 42 days. That's 6.0 weeks. We fished them with fishes. You see what I did there? We fished them with fishes, and in the end, everything was slimy. We finished off the day by bathing in the ocean and building sand people. Ha! That's funny. And that was my smelly day at the beach. So, if you don't have any bugs, you can turn it in. If you do, then go bug hunting. Go find and fix your bugs. And that is it for a day at the beach. Don't forget to turn it in. Pink button, bottom right corner.